Hey Stash Busters, welcome to Yarn Yak. How you guys doing tonight? I am Kimmer.
I'm Carla.
We are coming to you from the Stash in Baldwin, Wisconsin, which is our local yarn store. So we've got some stuff to show you tonight. Tonight, we are diving into working in the round. Facts, tips, tricks, maybe. We're going to just lightly touch on a few of the things that seem to vex people or that they don't really understand. But first, we're going to do show and tell. So I'll show you something that I made last night, and if you ever want to know more about the stuff that we're working on, there are some links and some pictures on our Yarn Yak page of our website, which is www.shopthestashbusters.com. And if you just click on Yarn Yak up at the top of the page, it'll take you to a page that tells you, what's going on, what yarns were featured, or whatever we were doing. Tonight, I made this hat last night. I love it so much.
It's beautiful.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
Beautiful.
I just love it. What I used was, this is a wool that I had in my stash. I'm not even sure what it was. I've had it for a long time. This, it's just worsted though. And this is the yellow color that is in the Japandi skank from the Weird Sisters. I think we still have a couple of that colorway left. It's a really great yellow. I'm gonna hold it closer to the camera so you can see. It's tweedy and it's got some like fall oranges in it and stuff. It's such a fabulous color. I love that color. And I'm not a huge yellow orange person, but I like it, especially in contrast to this dark teal. Like, I feel like it just really popped it. So anyway, I made a hat. I don't make a lot of hats, so I'm kind of pleased with this one. The pattern that I used is from Five Little Monsters. Her name, I believe, is Erica, and it's a free pattern, but you can get a ad-free version of it if you are so inclined from Ravelry or Etsy. So I put the link on our Yarn Yak page. If you just visit the link, you can read the free pattern with all the ads, or you can click whichever app you use, Etsy or Ravelry, and get a PDF version of it. But it's not hard. It's decently well written. It's a good little free pattern. I was really happy with it. So that's what I did last night. What I did this week, we're not even going to get into, but but that's what I did last night. Is I made this hat quick. So, and I'm actually busting out another one just because I actually really enjoyed the pattern. Again, I don't make hats very often, but so I'm making this one as just a bunch of different like Weird Sisters minis in DK, and I'm just,
what I really like about this is that it starts from the top and you work your way down. I like that. It's
not seamed. You just work in the round. In the round, and you come out, and then you go down, and then the texture is all done in a really simple way, just by working half double crochets in the back loop on a few rounds, and then a round of bead stitch, which is just working a puff stitch sideways around the post next to it.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So it's relatively simple. I think there's a tutorial on our YouTube channel for the bead stitch, but if there's not, I'll check tomorrow, and if there's not, I'll put one up there. So anyway, that's what I was doing. What about you?
Carrot cake.
What were you doing?
I was, I'm using a pattern that you had on the Facebook.
Oh, the Peggy Sunburst pattern?
Yes. And it starts
you got a lot of mileage out of that pattern.
Yes. It starts from the round.
From the center?
Yes.
Working your way out.
Yes,
so even though it ends up square, you're still working in the round.
Yep. And you can do this in several ways. I mean, some people change colors in the rounds and whatnot, and I opted to use a color changing yarn instead.
So you get like a nice gradual gradient as you move through the squares. It's going to be a really pretty blanket.
It's going to be gorgeous.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it. It's very cheerful.
It is, but using this yarn, it's just the squares are smaller than they would be if you were using worsted. So it's going to take a lot more.
I know that Momenti says it is worsted, but it is a chain ply, so it does squish. It works. It gets a little smaller, I guess. what I'm saying.
Yeah, it squishes up.
Pretty good. Yeah, so I would treat Momenti more like a DK.
But it does give me an opportunity to use this beautiful yarn bowl. I
am
love it.
super loving these socks.
Yes.
I have them. They're tucked in all my bags. Like,
Yep.
I love that I can just grab it and whoop it out, and it was flat in a zipper pouch because I needed it, and then it was right there, and I just stick a project in it and stick it back.
I'll tell you, I cannot wait to go on a trip.
There's no weight.
So I
They're
can
not
hang
heavy.
this,
They don't clunk. You don't have to worry about them breaking.
You can fold it up when you're done.
That's what boom. Before I needed this today, it was literally folded in half and then in half again and tucked into one of my hook pouches.
Definitely a game changer.
I've been looking for this size of these soft-sided bowls for a while, and I'm super excited that we found them. So we have those in the shop, and you can buy them on the website, you guys.
Yay.
Anyway, so, and now this week on Yarn Yak, I'm like, that's my best broadcaster voice. That's as good as it's gonna get. Don't make fun of me. So, did you know that anything that you work from the center out is working in the round? The round does not necessarily mean round. Generally, so a granny square is working in the round. When you see on a pattern row 1, round 1, that's the difference. A row is worked from right to left and back again, and so forth. You flip, you keep going, and around, it just means you're working like this, and it gradually gets bigger. So that's that demystified. There are 2 basic ways to start working in the round. There are other options, but there are 2 pretty basic, highly used ways to start it. The first one is to chain X number of stitches, usually 3 to 5, and slip stitch those together to form a ring. So you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you take your hook end, you loop around, and you grab your starting chain, slip stitch through it, and you form a circle. And then you work your stitches over. A lot of people think they're supposed to work them through the chains, like in the actual chain, but you're not. You just work the stitches over the chain, however many stitches your pattern calls for. So that's one way. What the kind of the pro con with that? Pro is you don't have to screw around trying to figure out how to do the magic ring. We'll get to that. But the con is that it leaves a kind of it can feel sloppy. Your stitches can slide on that ring, slide apart, slide back together. It's difficult to tighten it easily. Yeah. And so it can be kind of sloppy feeling or sloppy looking. And also, depending on your tension when you make the ring, it can actually be varying sizes, and we'll also get to that, why that is a thing. So many patterns these days ask you to start with the magic circle. Yep. So I'm going to tell you what a magic circle is in case you don't know, and then Carla's going to explain it. Okay. So a magic circle, technically, is a loop that you make, and then you work your stitches, your starting round of stitches, around the loop. Now, if that sounds like the same thing as the chain, it is, but it's not. When you finish the starting round, you then tug this tail end closed, and it eliminates the hole, like completely eliminates it. There's no hole. So that's what a magic circle is. Now, I'll tell you a secret. I hate the magic circle, and until this weekend, I never really understood exactly how to do it. I would get all tangled up in my fingers with my hook and the 2 ends, and until I was saying naughty words and throwing things, and I would just go. So I have my own little way of starting working in the round, but it's not a recognized way, so we're not going to get into that. So I watched Carla do a tutorial, which is on our YouTube channel, of how to do the magic circle. So I'm going to let her explain it.
Yeah, I find this, I struggled with it. Talk now. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I mean,
So it's amazing I stayed quiet this long.
It is.
But I struggled with other tutorials, videos, written out, everything else, and finally I was just done. So I was just going to do it myself. And all I do is just wrap it around and then anchor it and then start my stitches. You'll see more in the tutorial.
The tutorial is really good. Very clear.
The camera's right on my fingers, so I don't think it's worth showing it here super
You'll
close,
be able
but
to see anyway.
yeah,
She didn't go too fast either, you guys. You know how when you're watching a tutorial, the person just zooms through it and they say, it's just this. Like, you're such an idiot if you don't get
But listen, I used
like
worsted weight yarn and a J-hook so you can see everything really nice. I didn't use my skinny little yarn with my little E-hook here. I'm sorry, it's an H, but it still is small.
So guess what? There is no magic.
Yeah, exactly.
In the
there
magic
is
circle.
no magic in the magic circle. It's I spelled it all out for you. There's no magic in it. You can see exactly how it's done if you go to that tutorial, and it leaves you with this nice closed circle here. You don't have to worry about any gaps in there. You pull that
Or
close.
bumps.
Yes, yeah.
A lot of times when you do the chain and slip stitch, you'll notice in your work, you'll have your, say you have to chain 2 and then double crochet, and then you bring the other end around and you go to slip stitch to the top of your chain 2, for example.
Yep.
There'll be like a lump in your work from those mashing together. Yep. You don't get that if you do the magic circle.
Nope, you don't. You don't have that at all. And the bonus to this is once you pull this tight, when you go to weave in your end, it's going to just help anchor it down even more. You're not going to have to worry about it.
It's pretty anchored, let me tell you.
Yeah. So, and I did it on this one, and I pulled the string. I broke it, so I was pulling it so hard. But it doesn't happen normally on just regular yarn. I think it happened just because this is that braided. So yeah. I mean, check out the tutorial. You're going to love it.
She did a great job too, you guys. If you don't know, that was Carla's first official public tutorial.
It was.
She did a really good job. So you'll have to go check it out.
Yes, check it out.
So our WTF moment this week, when we were doing our little bit of research into working in the round, mostly about what we wanted to tell you guys. Both of us are pretty experienced with working in the round, but we're trying to figure out like what frustrates people, I get questions a lot about. So our WTF moment though, because I never really thought this through, although I know what happens, is that how you start affects the gauge and finish size of your project. And I was like, wait, what? So if you just think about it in just visual terms, even like I did it, draw a circle on a piece of paper, okay? So if you draw a circle on a piece of paper and then you draw a dotted line around it where your stitches will sit, you'll see what I mean. If you have a hole that big, the size of a dime or even a little smaller, in the center of a motif of a round, okay, and then you don't have any way to close it any tighter, and it's not supposed to, you were supposed to start with the magic circle, okay, your work that's a 1/2 inch to an inch bigger. Your stitches are spread out that much further, and your work is going to be that much bigger because that is exponential growth. That 1 inch will filter out to your work. So if you're making like a blanket and you just like a granny square blanket and you just start in the round and you just keep going, right? It's relatively inconsequential. Your gauge doesn't really matter. But if you're making a wearable, or if you have to make 80 of the same motifs and like squares, and you need them to be all precisely the same size because you're going to be joining them, that starts to become problematic. If yarn yardage is a concern or a question, starting with a chained hole versus a magic circle, if you calculate how much yarn extra is used as it moves out, and then in each piece, that's actually a fair amount of yarn. I mean, it's not 5 skeins, but it might be 1. So those are things to consider. It's kind of worth it, I think, to learn to do the magic circle and get that hole closed when you start working in the round. And then other things that matters because of stuffing. Like amigurumi. Yes. You need that closed hole because otherwise you have a hole that stuffing can be pulled out of, and that's no good. That's no good. So that was our WTF moment, was that how you start working in the round actually affects your gauge and your finish size. We were like, what? I guess, yeah, it would. It would, wouldn't it? Weird. Never thought of that. And maybe it's just me that I never thought of it. I don't know. Other people may have went, well, yeah, duh. But I didn't. Right. So anyway, the next thing that we wanted to tell you
As spiral rounds versus joining rounds.
Spiral versus joining.
Yes.
Raise your hand if you don't know what I'm talking about. Oh, I can't see you. I'm going to have to explain. So working your rounds, so when you work in a round, you come around and you are back where you started.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So you need to go out one and continue. Okay? So working in the spiral, you just go right over the top of that first stitch of the first round and you just keep going.
Keep going.
And you just keep going in a spiral. It's that just what it sounds like. So it looks much smoother and much more finished than if you do it the other way. That's the plus. The negative though is that it requires religious use of a stitch marker. Absolutely religious, because after just 1 or 2 rounds, you will not be able to see where your first stitch was anymore.
And you'll think that you'll have it, and you're not going to lose count, you know, and everything else. And I'm with everybody else. I like to be a rebel. I am the rebel leader.
It seems like it's such a pain in the butt to take a stitch marker out every round and move it up. Yep. It really does.
However,
I've
learned my lesson. I get tired of taking things apart and starting over again.
It is a much bigger pain in the butt trying to figure out your count where you were, because you got a phone call, had to pee, the dog barked, I don't know, the cat threw up on your foot, and it takes nothing. Yep. Your husband decided right then was a really good time to ask you about this thing you're going to do in a month.
Yep.
And when you told him to stop and go away, he didn't listen.
Well, spouting off numbers, and now you don't know where you're at. Yeah.
These things all happen to all of us pretty regularly. Yep. So the second way, that's working spiral rounds is especially good for amigurumi. So if you're doing stuffies, if you're making, you know, anything like that, the spiral way is much better. And again, it's because you're going to stuff it. And why is because joining rounds with a slip stitch. You tell them. I'm talking too much. Seriously.
Joining rounds with a slip stitch, it will you can see a seam. Okay, and it's noticeable. But it can also be gappy and bumpy, and it usually jogs from increase and decrease. So you'll see it, and it'll be running sideways.
So the only time that looks cool is if you're making some kind of zombie thing or Frankenstein and you want it to have a scar. Otherwise, it looks like ass.
Yeah, it doesn't look very good. For sure.
It looks like
because
what
I've done the same thing with. I've done the same item 2 ways, one with the seam and one without, and it works so much better just to have it. Okay, so I had to use a stitch marker. I thought I'm just gonna connect them and do them in rows, but you can see a seam, and
it's not a smooth, even seam like other things. Like when you stitch something together that has a straight row, 2 straight rows together, and you can make that seam just disappear. Right. Slip stitching to join rounds is not a smooth, even seam ever. It never is. So, so there's that. The it sounds like it would be easier, you know, to be a rebel and not use a stitch marker, but it's not. It isn't. And if you're going to spend time making something,
you're going to spend the time and the effort.
Just do it in the spiral so that you don't have that, you know.
And that's what I learned, because
now there are things though that you do have to join. For example, a granny square. You have to join to the top of the stitch. We're not saying that never join with a slip stitch. We're just saying when you have the option to work in a spiral, especially if something is directing you to work in a spiral, do it. Use your stitch marker and just do it.
And use a stitch marker.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. That's what we're saying. That's the expert advice from us here at Yarn Yak. Use your stitch marker.
Yes, take it from somebody who doesn't want to but will, if they want the item to turn out nice.
Same. I have rebelled against that many times before, and it's just not worth it.
Yep.
So anyway, the third thing that we wanted to tell you and talk to you about, and this is the one that the most questions about. People will come in here and bring me something, and they'll be like, I don't understand what I did. Right. Or I'll be teaching a class, and they'll be like, Kimmer, I have 72 stitches instead of 45. And I'm like, that's not even divisible by the same number. Right. How did you do that? So here is what it is. Increasing and decreasing. Now, I could do several shows about increasing and decreasing and really take it down to like a surgical strike, step by step, but we don't have time for that right now. So I'm just going to tell you the biggest things when you're trying to read a pattern, okay, language in a pattern makes a huge difference, okay? So we'll start with the very basic. INC just means to put 2 stitches in the indicated stitch. Unless your pattern specifies a different stitch count for INC, it's 2. Some patterns may say your increases are 3, in which case you would follow your pattern. But INC just means that you are putting more than 1 stitch in the same stitch, okay? That's how you make something get bigger. It starts like a piece of pie. It just starts getting bigger, okay? Decrease, DEC, in a pattern just means to join the stitch you're on and the next stitch together so that they finish with 1 stitch, so that the 2 holes below become 1 hole above. That's it. And it has the same basic rule. Decrease means 2, unless it's indicated in the pattern that they want you to do more than that. I've had some where they have you doing, for various reasons, a 3 stitch decrease or increase, but not very often. Because it generally, when they want you to do that, it is written a different way. So when you see in a pattern SC6, comma, INC, that means that you single crochet 6 separate stitches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then in the 7th stitch, the next one after the 6, you increase. You put 2 in that one. And usually those are repeat rounds. So then you start over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then increase. Simple, right? But it is exactly the same thing. In other patterns, it could be written
as saying 1
SC
in each of next 6 stitches,
comma,
increase 2 SC in next stitch,
which is 2 sentences.
Yep.
And usually people who write patterns that way use like a size 6 font. So you need a magnifying glass to read what you're supposed to be doing in the first place.
And it's very verbose. You don't need all those words in there to say that SC6, comma, increase.
Unless you're confused by the very, very scant amount of information in SC6, comma, increase, which is why we're hoping this will help you understand what that means better.
Right.
Now, the big doozy with this is, and it's very, if you're not looking for it, it's easy to become confused. 6 SC is not the same as SC6. 6 SC, the number first, means that you put 6 single crochet in 1 stitch.
Right. So it's telling you the number and then the single crochet.
You're making a shell, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, that is not.
Yeah.
It's telling you a specific, increase count and they're calling your attention to it by putting the number first.
Right.
Okay. And then it'll say, do this in the next after that stitch, but it's 1 stitch. So that is a larger increase than a standard 2 increase, and that's why they write it like that. And so you definitely want to don't assume, make sure you read the pattern carefully so that you understand what they're directing you to do. There really isn't any great reason for it to say 6 SC unless they're having you do like a shell, so it's not something that you would see very often in an amigurumi pattern, unless it's maybe a new pattern writer and they don't realize that there's a difference between the two. That could happen. And
in this instance, 6 SC, the single crochet, is just an example. It could be DC,
it could be
as
anything.
in double crochet.
Yeah, it could be anything.
Whatnot.
If the number is first, that generally means that you put whatever that is in 1 stitch.
Right.
If the number is second to the stitch, it usually means that each of the following a number of stitches it's 1 stitch in that each of that number. So again, SC6 would be single crochet 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times 6 stitches separately. It's a little pattern writing thing, and I understand why so many people get frustrated trying to read patterns, because it is literally a whole nother language. And I think we're going to do a series of shows about pattern directions and terms, because it's a lot more than you can take in a half an hour, or even 2 hours. It's more than you could do in one class. I mean, you just kind of have to tackle it in chunks.
And it's nice to see it too, rather than...
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
have it be visual.
Yep.
So as far as increasing and decreasing goes, I did want to add, there's one more thing. From personal experience, I highly recommend the invisible decrease. And I know Carla generally does that too. The invisible decrease is just decreasing the exact same way that you would, except that you only grab the front loop of the 2 stitches to make into 1 stitch instead of both the front and the back loop of each one, because when you grab both of them, it's bulky and it pulls, the fabric is so thick, when it pulls it together, it makes holes in your work. If you do the invisible decrease, where you only grab the front loop of each of the 2 stitches and merge them into 1 stitch, it's pretty much seamless. Like, you can't even see that you did a decrease, hence the name.
Pulls them really close.
Very, very nicely. However, there's something to remember when you do it, and that is that the back bar of the stitch that you just eliminated is still visible. And the reason that's good is because you don't have a hole in that spot. The reason that you need to be aware of that, though, is when your pattern says do a decrease and then start 6 single crochets again, you want to make sure that you don't accidentally single crochet into that single loop as your next stitch. That is not your next stitch. You just killed that stitch.
Yeah.
So you just want to be mindful of that when you use the invisible decrease. You want to make sure that your next stitch has got both bars.
Because you're decreasing, you don't want to be adding.
You don't want to add. You'll screw your whole stitch count up.
Yes.
So it's definitely, I always do it. And it only took me a minute to get used to watching for that. But you do need to be aware that you have to watch for that when you start doing it. So there's that. So that's kind of our working in the round, like, we barfed on you, didn't we? Did we barf on you? Sorry about that. We might have barfed on you.
We'll take it and we'll cut it down into little tutorials and be able
we'll
to,
try.
Yeah. And then you can reference whatever you need.
Right. That's a great idea. So, Carla, if you were stranded on a deserted island, I just love this hat. If you were stranded on a deserted island, would you rather be naked or have my hat? Just kidding. That's not your question.
Well,
that's not the question.
I know, but that's so hard.
If you were stranded on a deserted island, Carla, would you rather spiral with no stitch marker, nothing to mark your stitches with, or would you rather have a joggy, bulky, bumpy, holy seam?
Would I rather? Well, I'd probably rather spiral without I think I could find something to make a stitch marker.
You can't use a stitch marker. You have
I can't use it at all.
No,
I gotta count.
You have to count your whole project. I mean, you can stick your fingernail in there if you really want to.
This friend that I would make, because I was all by myself, would have like a Frankenstein scar, and I'd have nightmares. So I'd have to try spiraling without a stitch marker, because also it's not like I don't have time. Sure. I can take it apart.
You could write your counts in the sand.
I could.
You could with your finger.
Yep, I could. Yes.
So you would spiral even without a stitch marker.
I
would still spiral.
I would. Yeah.
Rather than have the joggy, bumpy hole.
Yeah. Because sometimes it tweaks my OCD.
Yeah, I would too. I would throw things at whatever chipmunks were chattering at me when distracting me. I was trying to count, but I would too.
Yes.
So.
And also, so if you were stranded on a desert island.
My questions are lame. Carla's are good.
Would you, since we're talking about in the round and amigurumi, would you rather have everything you make, such as amigurumi, become real, or would you rather be rescued?
Oh my gosh. Do I love other people or am I good?
Well, you. But think about it. Think about that cute giraffe.
I think. Oh my gosh. I think I'd rather have my creations come to life.
Yeah.
Are they going to kill me though?
No, they're friends.
Are they my friends?
Yes.
Well,
or be rescued.
I would make. I think that's a superpower I think I want to have. I think I would make things and have them come to life.
Awesome.
Eventually, I would probably miss people, but it would take a minute.
Yeah. I would say that I would love to visit that island because Kimmer makes some of the most beautiful, cutest things. with
that would be
Amber
fun.
Journey.
That would be, yeah, like I said, that would be a superpower I would love to have.
Yep. There you go.
Alrighty. Well, we hope you found tonight's Yarn Yak episode informative and helpful. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section of this broadcast. And you can ask us questions on our Facebook page too. There's a pinned post at the top of the page for Yarn Yak. Please do ask us anything. If we don't know, we'll find out. And your question could become the subject of a Yarn Yak episode.
Absolutely.
So that's super cool. We'd love to get that kind of feedback. Tell us what you want to hear from us about. Be sure to check out our website at www.shopthestashbusters.com and follow the Stash on Facebook. If you get our newsletter, which you can sign up for from our Facebook page or from our website, you will see that there is a note in there that Facebook has made some changes. So if you were not following as well as liking the Stash before, you are not doing either one now. So maybe just reach up and hit the button and just make sure that you're following. That way you'll get notifications, about all kinds of stuff. So, and then you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, which we are starting to pack with more content, tutorials, projects, you name it. We're starting to upload more and more things like that, as well as our Yarn Yak episodes get uploaded on Wednesday mornings on our YouTube channel. So check that out. Tune in next week for
hooks,
crochet hooks.
How and why to pick your tools.
How and why. For example, why does this matter so much? We're going to demystify this for you so that you know what you need for what you do and why. Next week on Yarn Yak. I'm Kimmer.
I'm Carla.
And we'll see you then. Have a good night.